What's up, you guys? This is Felicia, your Ballin' and Bipolar Success Coach here. What I'm going to try to do today is I want to introduce my book to you guys, Be Happier, Get the F Out. It launches today. There was a miscommunication error on my part with Amazon. So I wanted to let you guys know the Kindle version on Amazon is still 99 cents. You can absolutely download this book today for 99 cents only. The paperback version was $8 because of printing costs. So that was a miscommunication on my part. I so apologize to you guys. I just did not know that they couldn't do 99 cents for a paperback. And you can imagine printing costs. So the lowest we could go was $8 for the paperback version. You can still download it today on Kindle for 99 cents. So that's a perfect way to read it. If you can just download it digitally, totally fine. Today, what I wanted to do was I wanted to try to stay on long enough for people to kind of come into this. And I wanted to be able for you guys to ask me any questions about the book, if you're bipolar, maybe things that you struggle with. So what I'm going to do today on this first live, I'm going to do 3 today. I'm going to do one now, I'm going to do one later on in the afternoon, and then I'm going to do one this evening. As people see this, I'm going to stay here and see maybe if you guys want to join, if you want to take part in this live video with me. And then in the comments, I'll be asking you questions. So if you want to comment or ask me any questions personally, I will go over those with you. So I will hopefully be on for an hour each time. So I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if you guys are going to see this or want to join in, but what I'm going to do for all intents and purposes is I'm going to share with you my bipolar journey in this first live today. So you might be wondering, where did this girl come from? Why did she write a book? Why is she relevant to me? So when all of this started, I didn't know I was going to write a book. I didn't know that that was my journey at all 2 years ago. If you are bipolar or know someone who is, the book is going to be awesome for you, your family members, or your friends who are bipolar. And it's nice to learn what they might have gone through. Or if you're bipolar or you struggle with depression, anxiety, mania, things like that, the book is really awesome because it can relate to you, but also give you really, really good tools to use in your life. The whole premise for me for writing that book was it's almost an autobiography or a biography. You know, it's my story on how I got diagnosed, but throughout the book we go over actual solutions to mania, to depression, and to anxiety, and how to really get through, kind of weed through the bipolar diagnosis itself. Then we get into the real nitty gritty of who we are. You know, when I was first diagnosed bipolar, I just lost my sense of self. I didn't know how to live anymore. I didn't know how to be me anymore. I thought my whole life was a lie because I was manic my whole life, you know, and all of my confidence was really depleted. And throughout the book, we're going to talk about that because there's going to be phases in your life where you're going to need to ask different questions. So later on in the book, we really talk about thriving in our lives and who do we want to be? What are our goals? And then, but in the beginning, it's really survival, you guys. So what I wanted to go through with you guys today was in 2010, how this all kind of transpired. And this is very much in the book, but hearing from me is cool. I also have a podcast you guys can listen to on any outlet. It's Ballin' and Bipolar. It's a podcast about my diagnosis, but really there's how-tos in there as well, in navigating, you know, through life while being bipolar at the same time. So when I was growing up, to give you guys a little bit of information on me, I was very social. I loved my life. I never was depressed. I never knew the word anxiety. Those things weren't real to me. I loved who I was. I was a very social person. I was a server and I could come into work and 10 people would be talking to me at the same time and I was all in, all about it. I had an apartment in 2010 and people were over there all the time. There was never a time where, you know, I would just be alone. Now, I was fine being alone. I liked my alone time. But in this time of my life, I was 21 years old. We always had people over, very social atmosphere. What started happening was, and if you're bipolar and you've been through this before, you're going to be like, yeah, same. what happened was in 2000, so I got diagnosed, I think it was on January like 18th, 2010. So all of this started kind of happening in December of 2009. Now, what you have to know about bipolar is there's so many different prongs to bipolar. There's bipolar 1, there's bipolar 2, there's mixed episodes. There's people that suffer from more from depression and anxiety rather than mania, things like that. Bipolar 1, if you do not know, is defined as having at least one manic episode once in your life that lasted at least 8 days. And then really it has derailed your life. So, and that's kind of my definition of bipolar 1. Very, very dramatic. And I had a manic episode for 8 days where I was hospitalized and then just kind of lost everything. I had to be diagnosed. And then I was very, very clinically depressed. And then there was just a journey to rebuild my whole life for years after that. Bipolar 2 is you can suffer from highs and lows, okay? There's a thing called hypomania, which really, it's somebody on their best day, act like, or think of somebody who has gotten the job they want, or they had an awesome day, or they're really excited about the weekend and they really have high energy, rapid speech. That could be somebody on their best day. That's really hypomania. So the regular Joes out there who are not bipolar could still be in a hypomania state sometimes. But bipolar 2, you have not suffered from a manic episode that was delusion of grandeur, okay? So bipolar 2, the difference is that and I've read this from books and my doctors have confirmed this, so this isn't just BS. In bipolar 2, you can suffer more from depression. It is easier to treat because it's not so dramatic, but it is harder to diagnose because it's not so dramatic. So doctors might think that you're just depressed, or they might think that you just have ADHD or anxiety. So it's a little bit harder to diagnose bipolar 2 versus bipolar 1. Now, bipolar 1 is easier to diagnose because it is so dramatic. Like my doctor knew exactly what was going on when I came into the hospital. But it is much harder to treat and takes much longer to come down and get level because it is so dramatic. Now, there's mixed episodes that they call them where you can kind of float through mania and depression and things like that. What I also wanted to kind of educate you guys on was there's kind of stages to mania into a manic episode. You don't just wake up one day and you're manic. Like, there are stages to it. So for me, what relates to me is football. So I like to say, and this is in the book too, I like to say that hypomania is the pee-wee football, okay, of a manic episode. So hypomania is over here where we're rapid speech, we have high energy, but it's like pee-wee football, okay? Nobody can really tell that anything's much different, you're just excited. Then we enter the stage of acute mania. Now, that's what I like to call college football of a manic episode. So we're getting to a point where people know something is not right. We're getting a little delusional. We might be, and it's not schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is, and I don't know a lot about schizophrenia, but it's different in that schizophrenia, from what I understand, is you're hearing voices in your head, right? Or somebody's telling you to do something. Delusional mania is like believing things are there that just aren't, like you are delusional. So at this state in my manic episode, I thought that I was going to be famous. That's where it all started, and I'll go back there for a second. But it becomes very delusional. You're still very, very high energy. You're very, very happy and elated and euphoric. But you can get angry very, very quickly too on a dime. So that's where acute mania hops in. Now, the bigger side to mania is we're at pro football is delirious mania. So delirious mania is when you are completely out of touch with reality. You are in a different state of consciousness. When I was reading about this and they said a different state of consciousness, I was like, holy crap, that was me in the hospital. Because I was just not there. I had no idea. I thought that I was in the hospital because they were having a parade for me, and it was all part of the story. So it was wild. I was delirious. That is a different state of consciousness, and believing that you're there for a completely different reason than you are. You have no touch with reality itself. So how all this transpired for me personally was I, in December of 2009, I started talking in really metaphorical terms. It was really high energy, but I started just, I love a metaphor, but it was kind of normal, but that's kind of where it progressed. Was I started being metaphorical. I was like, oh my gosh, the sun is shining on this, so this means this, and just weird shit. Then, when the first day that it was odd was when we went out for New Year's. And New Year's obviously was on, the next day was January 1st, 2010. Okay. I was 21 years old. And by the way, you get diagnosed bipolar usually from 18 to like 23, because that's when your brain is actually pretty, it's developed at that point, and then it can manifest. Now, I was smoking weed a lot at that time in my life, so the mania triggered even more because weed kind of heightened it, okay? So during this time, New Year's Day comes around, and the night before we had gone out. It was me, my friend Amanda, and Anna, and we had gone out to, it's called 4th Street Live in Kentucky. Lots of bars, party scene. But the weird thing is that I had been drunk before. I had done blackouts. I knew what it was if I had gone too hard the night before. When I woke up on January 1st, 2010, something wasn't right. I was missing just spots of time, and it was weird because it was like the whole night was just gone. Like there wasn't like that drunk, like come in and out. Oh, I remember that. It was just gone. And what I learned later is when you're manic, you can suffer from blackouts because your brain is like on fire, and you don't have time to like compartmentalize and remember all this stuff because your brain is going a million miles a second, and it just blacks out. So I learned that later. So I remember that day I was like, golly, that was weird. But I didn't think anything of it. I just went along with my day and kept rocking on. How this progressively got worse and worse was kind of the next day, I quit my job. I worked at Cracker Barrel at that time. I quit my job, and that was a red flag because I never would have done that. But how I quit my job was weird. I came into Cracker Barrel, and at this time, my state of mind was, for some reason, I thought that I was going to be famous, and I was better than this. I was better than working at Cracker Barrel, and I had bigger plans. And so what you want to remember is bipolar, it's like mania is a seed that was planted. It didn't just come out of nowhere. So everybody, when they started seeing me kind of hyper and rapid speech and like saying the stuff about being famous, the thing about that is that came from a place that Felicia has said before. It didn't come out of nowhere. I have always had this notion in my mind that like I want to be famous, but this was delusional at this point. So it was familiar, I guess, for people that knew me, but still a little odd. And when I came into Cracker Barrel, I was telling all my server friends, I was like, we're better than this. We don't need to be servers. We're going to do all these things in life. Like, I'm out, and just quit my job. I would have never quit my job at Cracker Barrel, number one, and I would have never quit a job without having another job lined up. A symptom of mania is you do things off on a whim. So promiscuity, you can be very sexual in mania. You do things that are very out of character, quitting your job out of character. You can spend a shit ton of money in mania. My nephew's in here, you guys. Sorry, Malachi. You can spend a crap ton of money when you're in a manic episode or a manic state because you have no grasp on spending money and what that means. I have known of people who have spent their whole life savings in days. I have known people who have cheated on their spouses in a manic episode, and the spouse has to deal with the aftermath of that. There's delusion, believing things that just are not real or not really coming to pass, all kinds of stuff. So I was like getting to be the poster child of this thing. So when I quit my job, the next day it progresses, and there was some kind of award show on. I think it was the iHeartRadio Music Awards at that time. I had invited people over. Remember, I always had people over at this point to my apartment. And that was the day, this is like day 3, that was the day where people knew something was not right. It wasn't quite time to call my parents yet, but something was not right. So at this point in time, I think I had maybe 10 or 15 people over, something like that. And I just would not shut up, and people could not keep up with what I was saying. In my state of mind, I was trying to bring them in on the news. Like, Felicia has arrived. I'm going to be famous. This is like the biggest world kept secret. And I have to let you guys know. And I like I mean, I'm talking about, you guys, mania. I have this in the book. I said something like, mania is like 19 sunflowers bursting in your brain. And it's like the Energizer Bunny cannot, will not stop ever until you are made to come down. And the manic energy of somebody can scare people. I mean, it absolutely, I remember the look in my friend's eyes at that time. And I'll tell you later, this will come later, but my friend Amanda just had the look of fear. The fear in her eyes will never leave me. But at this point, day 3, I had people over. Mariah Carey had accepted an award that night. And in her acceptance speech, she said something like, I know who my true fans are, like, thank you, or whatever. Somehow she was talking to me. I believe that Mariah Carey was talking to Felicia Keller in Louisville, Kentucky that night, because I was going to be her someday, and she knew that I was coming. And that's what I kept saying. I was like, oh my gosh, Mariah Carey's talking to me. She knows I'm going to be famous, like blah, blah, blah. So it was like this conspiracy theory that these celebrities knew, but nobody else knew, So my friends kind of were like, what's going on? Well, then I was in my room, and my sister was over that night, and I could not calm down. It was like I was trying to tell them things, but my mouth couldn't keep up with what my brain was trying to say. So it's like I couldn't talk fast enough. I couldn't get the news out fast enough. And my sister was like, Felicia, nobody understands what you're talking about. And I was like, it's like this is in your head. And like, when you're manic, you're like, why aren't people understanding this? Like, why can't people get this? And so when my sister questioned me, I got really, really defensive and really upset. She was like, Felicia, nobody knows what you're talking about. Like, slow down, slow down. And I was like, if you don't get this, you can get out of my apartment. And I was like, you can leave, and she was really young at that time. She was like 16. So she was freaked out. And she went home. My friend Noelle at that point, shout out Noelle, she was really good at being like empathetic. She like looked at me in my eyes, and she was like, just what are you trying to say? And I was like, why doesn't anybody get this? I'm going to be famous, blah, blah, blah. And it just made no sense to anybody. And I can't even tell you how fast I was talking at that time, because in the state that I'm in now, it's like impossible to talk as fast as I was with the energy that I had. So as people were leaving, people were I learned later that my friends were like, have you noticed that? Like, is Felicia kind of acting weird? Like, and so it wasn't time to call my parents yet, because, I wasn't a danger to myself. I didn't seem like I was hurting anybody. It was unknown. It's not like back then people were like, must be a manic episode. We should call a doctor. Like, nobody knew what the heck was going on. And then it just progressively got worse and worse. The next day, I remember Jimmy Fallon was on. He has his late show. And when they look in the camera and it looks like they're like looking at you. Well, I believed that from New York City to Louisville, Kentucky, Jimmy Fallon was talking to me, and that he knew that I was going to be famous, and I was like going to be on a show. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to be on Jimmy Fallon. I'm going to be famous. And I was like talking to him. This is delusion. Okay. This was when we were in acute mania at this point, where we're at the college football version of mania. I was like, Jimmy, I feel you. Yes, I get you, and all this stuff. It was wild. Then I had kind of a sexcapade weird thing. Like, I was a virgin at that time in my life, and I was brought up Mormon. So that was like a thing. No, everybody knew I didn't do that and stuff. And I had I like hopped on my friend ready to pounce, like Samantha from Sex and the City. Like, it was wild. So that was really weird, very out of character. After that point, my friend called my dad. He was like, something's wrong. Like this is not right. Then it transpired to the other thing is about mania that's crazy, you all, is you can have godlike tendencies or feel like you're a higher power. So I don't know the technical term for that, but I swear there was one night where I had people over one of these nights. I don't remember exactly what day, but there was a guy there, and we were having a real conversation, and it probably was a nice little conversation, but I believed there was a point where there, like the light was shining on me, and he like touched me, and I swear I thought like this must be what Jesus felt like when people touched him. Like it was crazy. And I feel like that's going to freak out a lot of people, but that's how I felt. I felt like I was a higher being or a higher power, and I was like helping this guy, and like he touched me as if to be healed, and I was like, and I didn't think I was God. I didn't think, like, don't get me wrong, it's probably still as bad as you think it is though, because I really believed. I was like, wow, I think this is probably what Jesus felt like when he was talking to people. Freaking wild. That then it transpired to the day that it all the shit hit the fan was when my friend Amanda, I this was in the middle of the night. If you knew me at all then, you would know that I always had my door locked. I always had my door closed. I was very like a safe and secure person. I lived on my own, so like I'm just like that. This specific night, I had texted my friend John like 80 times. He was like, "What is going on?" He woke up to like 80 to 100 text messages of me just like rambling, song lyrics, all this stuff. I remember saying, "Oh, I'm going to be the next Lil Wayne. This is it." I remember Dr. Phil. That was when I believed that I knew the path. So when and I now I'm going back. So there was one night where my name is Felicia, Phylecia. A lot of people call me Phil, Phyl. Okay, so that's what I go by, Phil. And I was like, holy crap, I'm gonna be the next Dr. Phil. That's it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna email Dr. Phil McGraw's website. I'm gonna get on his show. Oprah is gonna do a discovery on me because Oprah helped Dr. Phil get famous and get his own show. I'm gonna be interviewed. Holy crap, that's it. So that was like the my being famous career path. All right. So I thought that Jimmy Fallon knew who I was. He was working in the background for them to get me on his show. Mariah Carey knew that I was going to be famous, but the real path was that I was going to be the next Dr. Phil. I was going to be featured on his show, and then Oprah was going to do a discovery on me, and then boom, I'm famous. So that's the brain we're working with at the time. Okay. It was crazy. It was crazy. So that's where we are. Then go back to the night where it was in the middle of the night. I kept blowing up my friends and blowing up my friend Amanda. She worked at UPS, like third shift. She comes over to my door wide open, and I'm sitting there by myself talking nonstop, had the music blasting. I had papers everywhere, like post-it notes. Just I was writing in my journal. It was like out of a movie. And I was like, "What's up?" Da 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 da. And she looked at me with just utter fear in her eyes. And I got defensive because if you question that state of mind, it was like you need to get out. So that's where the title comes from. So she was like, "Felicia, what is going on? What is going on? I'm so like, what are you doing?" And I said, "Amanda, if you can't be happy, then you can get the F out." And I threw a cup at the wall. After that, she told me that I hit her, which I have no recollection of. I don't know why Amanda would lie about something like that. But that is where mania, you're usually happy, but you can get very, very angry very quickly. And Amanda promptly left and called my mom. And so then the next day, my mom's like frantic. She's like, "What's going on?" Because I saw my parents once a week, twice a week, but they didn't know. And this, you guys, was in a very condensed amount of time. This is days. And so all of a sudden, my mom and dad are getting phone calls from my friends like, "Felicia is not right. She needs help. Something's going on." And the thing about it is, what does everybody think? They think it's drugs. They think it's cocaine, meth, something like that. They're like, "But we're around Felicia. Like, we know she smokes weed and she drinks. Like, that's it. We know she doesn't do drugs." And so when my dad hears that something's going on, he texts me and he's like, "Are you on speed? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "No, man, I'm just high on life." Like, and all this stuff. And really I was. I'm telling you guys, I did not sleep for at least a week. I had lost probably 20 pounds in a couple weeks. My pants were falling off me because I didn't eat. I remember metaphorically, we had a couple weeks before this, we had said no white. We were going to stop eating carbs and sugar and pasta. And it had snowed outside. And my friends were like, yo, you want to go tubing? And I was like, no white, no white. I don't leave my apartment. Da 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 da. And so just freaking weird. And there was no need for food or sleep. I had no time for food, sleep. At that time, I wasn't even smoking. I wasn't drinking. My brain was absolutely just on fire. And so then after that, it was my mom comes over, and this is kind of the sad part and the weird part that I can't believe I did this. So back then, I used to use, those little metal scissors to cut like probably your nose hair. You can get them at Walgreens, but back then, pain is beauty, but not if you can help it. And I always used to cut my eyebrows using those little scissors. And my mom came in my apartment. She said, I knew something was wrong when you answered the door because you had a little tiny tank top on with no bra. And I would never answer the door like that. I'm just not, confident with my body like that. That's just not me. And so then she looked around and she was like, your apartment wasn't like trashed, but there was papers everywhere. There was journal entries everywhere. There was Post-its everywhere. There was paper everywhere. And she was like, what is going on? And so I went back to my room and I knew that my mom was concerned, which I did not want to be questioned. I had no gravity of what was going on, And so if you were not on my level, rocking me on, I was like, get out. So I told my mom, I said, Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have these scissors in my hands and you need to leave. And she was like, okay. And took a U-turn right back out and called my dad. She's like, what do we do? And my dad at that point had worked about an hour away. He worked at some restaurants, managing those restaurants in about an hour away from where we live. So he was like, okay. He was like, we've got to call the cops. And then what they had to do was they filed a mental inquest warrant to expedite the process. Now, my dad is very aware that when police are called, they are naturally on the defensive. They don't know if I'm a harm to them or to others or to myself. So he knew that this is a dangerous situation. He said, before any cops go into that girl's apartment, I want to be downstairs and I want a female police officer with them when they go into her apartment, because God only knows what could have transpired. And you all very well know that these mental inquests kind of, when cops go, there needs to be a mental health professional with the police officer, because the police officers are going to automatically be on the defensive. Now, what did they think? They thought that I was a danger. They thought that I was on drugs. So they're going in like ready to pounce. Now, my dad was like, you all go in there and I need a female police officer and you all do not enter that girl's apartment until I'm downstairs. And so I didn't know my parents were there. The cops come over and this was a God thing. I thought that the cops were there and I needed to go with them because it was all part of the plan. It was all part of the story. So thank God that I believed that they were just taking me to where I needed to go, because now in my brain, we're having a huge parade to like announce me to the world because I am now famous. And so I needed to go with the cops because this was part of the story. Now, if somehow I had not thought that, or if I had gotten defensive, you can imagine how badly that could have gone. So thank goodness that I was just delusional and thought the cops were taking me where I needed to go. Like, this is part of the story. So I get in the cop car and my parents had followed them, which I didn't know. And what they were doing was they were taking me to U of L, University of Louisville Hospital first, because what they want to do is they want to do urinalysis, blood work to see what is actually going on. Is she on drugs? Let's get that checked off the list first. And then we need to just analyze what is happening. I remember in the cop car, I'm just talking away, and I was like, yo, can you turn up this song? There was a Fergie song on. I asked for chapstick. And then the cops told my parents that that we didn't know who she was talking to. She was talking nonstop. It was like she was talking to somebody back there. And really, I was just talking to them. Like, I wasn't talking to myself. I was just talking to them about how famous I was going to be. So God only knows. Now we have entered the world of delirious mania. We're in pro football. We're at the Super Bowl of a manic episode, you guys. And what that was now when I got to the hospital, here's what the craziest shebang was. I'm in this little room. Now, I remember being alone in the room for a while and then somebody else came. But At this point in time, I remember being alone in my room, or in this kind of like holding room. It wasn't like a cell, it was just a sitting area. Now, there was a nurse behind this little partition, and then there was another nurse that I saw in the background. I got so irritated because nobody would tell me what was going on, and I got physically uncomfortable. I was like, what is going on? Blah, blah, blah. So I got really irritated. I remember banging on the walls, and I was like, I'm in here. I'm in here. Like, hello. I thought that my friends and my family were outside of those walls waiting on me to do this parade. Like, that's what we were doing. So when that didn't happen, I was like, what is going on? And so then I believe that the nurse behind the wall, it was a male, a guy, and I thought that he was Dr. Phil's son, you guys. Because remember, in my brain, we're doing a parade, Felicia's being discovered, I'm going to be famous. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, cool. So this is all part of the plan. I'm here. They're kind of doing their research on me. This is Dr. Phil's son, so he's going to go and tell Dr. Phil so that they can do this big discovery on me. Then I saw a nurse. She was African American. She had Oprah's like height and build, if you can imagine. And I was like, holy shit, Oprah's here. I was like, Oprah's here. She's doing her research on me, but she's like in nurse's attire, so I guess she's just undercover. I'm telling you, you can't make this up. I guess you could make it up, but I'm not. This is what happened. So then I'm like, oh, it's freaking on. Like, Oprah's back there. She's doing her research. They're just acting cool. They don't want to let me know. So then a lady comes in, like a patient comes in, and she was like skinnier. She was African American, looking like she was having some trouble in her life. Same story. She was there with me. And we were just talking away, and I believed that, and now let me preface this with Michael Jackson had died in 2009, the year before. I was very aware of this. Like, I mourned his death and everything. Now that's a podcast for another day, but I believe that that woman had like embodied Michael Jackson's spirit. And I kept telling her, I was like, I know who you are. I was like, yes, I know who you are. And she was like, I'm whoever you want me to be, baby. And I was like, yes, I know who you are. It was wild. I swear I believe that it was like Michael Jackson had like swooped into this lady's body and like was there in spirit. I don't know. It was wild. But so then that happens. Now I had been there for, I don't know, I think I might have been there for 24 hours, something like that. Now, if my parents hadn't done a mental inquest warrant, I could have been there for days. And so what it did was it expedited everything. So once they got my urinalysis, the blood work, they found out, okay, this girl's not on anything. She's not on drugs. Like, this is mental. She needs to go to a psychiatric facility. Finally, I'm like, they believed my parents, because my parents are sitting there telling them, like, we understand that a lot of parents say that their kids aren't on drugs, but we know our kid is not. She smokes weed and she drinks alcohol. Like, that's it. And so, but they had to do what they had to do. So at this point, there was no coming down. I was still sunflowers and rainbows and blah, all this stuff. I get in the ambulance, where the big shebang here to end the manic story was, I get in the ambulance, and I was like asking for Vaseline or chapstick for my lips, and the lady in the ambulance was kind, and she was talking to me. She was communicating with me. I wasn't just some crazy lady that, she didn't feel the need to say anything to. She was just kind of going along with it. But I believe that lady was my grandmother, who had died a couple years ago. And I was like, I know who you are. I was like, I know who you are. Thank you, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Maybe my grandma was there in spirit. Maybe that's true. But I believe that like that lady was my grandmother. And so she was very kind and gave me Vaseline for my lips. And my lips are always chapped and stuff, like holler at me chapstick my whole life. So that's where we are. And now when I woke up in the mental health hospital, I don't know how many hours transpired. I don't know what they gave me, which I need to research on my own. And I've called the hospital many times, and they never answer. So, don't even get me started on that side. But the thing about it is that what I learned later, my dad had told me just recently as I was writing my book, was they had called my dad multiple times after they had given me like the initial, medicine from somebody who's manic or somebody who's really, really hyperactive. They said, dude, we've given her everything. Like, she is still on 20, level 20. She's not calming down. We don't really know what to do. So then they'd give me another dose of whatever. And then finally, I guess they gave me like 3 rounds of med. I don't know how many rounds, but they called my dad multiple times and they were like, dude, we don't know what to do. So God only knows what horse tranquilizer they had to do to like calm my ass down. And I don't care what you believe. At that point in time, I needed to come down, and that's the only way it was going to happen. And so what I remember was ambulance. The next day or however long, I woke up like standing on the wall at the hospital. I couldn't see, I couldn't stand up straight. It was like all a blur. I was just like standing there, just out. And so, and that's where I leave you with the manic episode. So that's really the first part of my book, and I would really love for you guys to get it today. Um, it's on Amazon. Remember, the Kindle copy is 99 cents. You can absolutely get it for 99 cents only. If there's anybody on here right now, I don't see a lot of people, but what I'm going to do is I'll just hop on throughout the day, and maybe you guys can, we can comment and kind of chat a little bit and see maybe if you guys have any questions at all. But I wanted to share that with you all. The paperback version is $8. They could not do 99 cents only today because of printing costs, but you can definitely get it at 99 cents on Kindle on Amazon. Be Happy or Get the F Out launches today. Go check it out. Thanks.